We are now live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Raising Multilinguals Live. It's a early morning for me out here in the Montreal area. It's actually a little dark, so we are getting into that season. So my name is Tetsu Young from Ask Tetsu. Let me throw this out to Uta.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Raising Multilinguals Live. It's noon, a little bit later than noon here where I am in the Netherlands. My name is Ute Lima-Geribot from Ute's International Lounge.
Is it noon? I thought it was 1.
It's 1, yeah.
You had your lunch. You had your lunch. I didn't have my breakfast. I woke up really early and frantically taking care of the kids before throwing the ball to my wife so she can go out and send them out to school soon. So today, we have a very, very special guest. Somebody who I've been following for quite a few years now. We're very honored to have Adam Beck.
Hi, everybody.
The zookeeper himself, I call himself.
I guess so. I'm the head keeper.
That's right. So Adam has a very famous blog, at least in Japan and elsewhere in the world. I know many people from Europe who knows Adam and his Bilingual Monkeys blog, and more recently the very lively forum called the Bilingual Zoo. That's why we call him the zookeeper. And countless books, including this one. I love this book. I Want to Be Bilingual, written from the perspective of the baby himself. So he's
That's right.
a fun author. Very, very. He has a very high expertise in the area of raising multilingual kids, and he has raised 2 kids in 3 languages, and not just any 3, but a very distant languages: Japanese and English, and for some reason Spanish. I guess we'll find out why. So welcome, Adam. Thank you for sharing your time. It's late out there.
Yes, of course. Thank you for inviting me, Tetsu and Uta, and I'm very happy to be here. And I'm an open book, and I'm happy to answer any kinds of questions that you have or anyone else might have. Okay.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So, Adam, we're gonna dive right in.
Okay.
We're gonna start with your general, raison d'être. What's got you started on the bilingual journey and wanting to raise your kids in multiple languages, and then that goes into obviously your blog and then your forum. Tell us your background, anything related to languages.
Well, this all started about 30 years ago, I guess, but I was teaching. I taught for a number of years at Hiroshima International School before I had children of my own. And so I was working with a lot of bilingual and multilingual kids, and I became really fascinated in the subject. And I think my wife and I, we hoped that we would have children of our own eventually, and then we did. And so it became my background. I was a longtime teacher of bilingual and multilingual kids, and then we had 2 children of our own, right? And so it was quite an education, I think, being a teacher and being a parent and working with these children. And so I started sharing my experiences and ideas, mostly here in Japan at first, with a parent group and a teacher group, and the feedback I was getting was very positive. So I thought, okay, well, I guess this was the heyday of blogging, and I started a blog. Actually, I started it 10 years ago, exactly this month. So It's now the 10th anniversary. It's hard to believe that 10 years have passed, and I've actually been able to sustain this thing. But that was the beginning of Bilingual Monkeys, okay? And so that was 2012. And so I really had a lot of enthusiasm for sharing my experiences and ideas at the blog. And my kids were 8 and 5 at the time. Of course, that means they're 18 and 15 today. And so the audience started to grow. It was catching on. And then some people there were a lot of comments at the blog, but people were saying they wanted to interact with each other more And this was the time when I guess Facebook groups and Instagram, those platforms, which are great for socializing now, um, among among parents of bilingual and multilingual kids, it really wasn't so popular at the time. I guess it just hadn't broken out yet. So forums were kind of still a thing. And I started the Bilingual Zoo forum in 2014. So this was 2 years after the blog began.
Has it been 8 years already?
Yes, it has.
I said it was more recently. I was thinking more like 2016, 17. Oh my.
No, it's been a while for both of them.
How can the
And
time go by so quickly?
I'll tell you.
Oh
So
my
anyway, that
goodness.
was the forum, and then there was a lot of activity at the forum as well. And that's how those two things began. And because I was thinking and writing about this experience so much at the blog and the forum, then naturally it kind of, because I've been a writer for a long time, and then it was time to start writing these books. And so that's how it all grew from there. I
Mhm.
really, honestly, I had no grand ambitions when I began any of this. And I guess I still don't in a way. I've just really been enjoying the ride and trying to,
Words of the
share my
wise.
experience and ideas. And if that can benefit others, then that's very gratifying to me.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic. Bilingual monkeys. Is there a story behind the name? Is it did this just come up where you're just looking at your kids going, oh yeah, bilingual monkeys?
Well, to be honest, the first idea I had was bilingual monsters. That's when my kids were very small and they were little monsters at the time. But I thought that might be too extreme. And
You
so
toned it down.
I toned it down a bit and went with the monkeys. And I wanted it to be a playful site. That's my style anyway. One of my main things is to be really serious, be very serious about this aim, but be very playful about our approach, right? So I wanted to do the
I
same
love it.
with the work that I do, with the blog, with the books, with everything I'm doing. I wanted to be serious on one hand, but I also wanted to be very playful and appealing and engaging on the other hand. And so that's where Bilingual Monkeys started. And the illustrations, I think, help in that sense to bring it to life and to bring to life that playful spirit.
That's great.
I,
Definitely a great name, I think. Yeah.
yes, I would like to share just one comment of someone who's following us. It's next level English is saying mine are still monsters. But when I first came across your blog, Adam, and it was 10 years ago, I remember, because I was looking for all kind of resources and what people were sharing about bilingualism, raising children with multiple languages, etc. I was thinking more about 10 monkeys jumping on the bed. That was more or less what my children were doing at that time. So I like now to know the truth about the monkeys.
That's
Good to know.
it. Yeah, that's
Yes.
it. So
Yeah.
yeah. But it's fun. It's been fun. And when you have something that, a blog or a book or whatever it is, and if it can have also a playful identity, I think that really that helps in terms of imagery and all of that, right? So there's a lot I can do with monkeys, and I have done over the years, probably to excess to some extent. But anyway, it's been fun, and it has to be, for me to really do the work, I have to feel some enthusiasm for it myself. And so I really wanted it to be fun and playful, not only for the audience, but for me as well, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think it also reflects in your books, because I mean, in the
Yes.
maximize your child's bilingual ability, it's very much like a guide for parents, so to see what is possible and what to watch out for. And then you have the bilingual success stories, where you gather all the different experiences from parents who have or are successfully, whatever successful means, we can maybe point this
Sure.
out in a moment.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm happy also that you included my story about that, or our
Thank
story, the ones of
you.
my
Absolutely.
family.
Mhm.
Number 22. And then you have this one, which we all love, right? This is just to like, I love it. Like, if anyone is still doubting, and I hope no one who is following this is still
Here it is.
doubting. Exactly. But it's a perfect gift to give whoever is saying, what are you doing? But isn't it too much? Is this not just, you just don't say anything, you say, take this, read. It's easily written. It's really fun. And I like this balance between teaching, educating to some extent, and having fun. Hence the title of today, right? Maximize your success and joy at raising
Absolutely.
multilingual kids. So that's something
Yeah.
that we are all somehow trying to do, right, Tetsu, as well.
Indeed. Like we can't, I can't talk enough about this. Because I'm not a good reader. So, it takes me a long time to read, but it's really simple. It's just small text written from the perspective of the baby, but it's really deep. Like there's a lot of learning that you could see how to really think from the child's perspective. Rita talks about this a lot too. You always have to start from the kid's perspective. So it's a great, I think it's a great balance, like Uta said, of having fun, and it's not a kid's book. So
Right. I mean, I could add a little backstory to this actually, because it grew out of a blog post that I wrote, which was originally, it was the same idea where the newborn baby is telling the parents, I really want to be bilingual, and this is how you can help me. And that post is a long time ago. It's probably 9 years ago. But that really kind of caught on, and I was in a way surprised, because sometimes I'm really just, I'm writing a post or creating something that I find, somehow interesting and entertaining for myself. And sometimes it catches on with others, sometimes it doesn't. But this one did, and I thought, I have something there. And then later on, it was a number of years after that, but I had that in my mind, and I thought I could turn that into a book, and I really had to expand it, and I brought in an illustrator. But I was really happy with how it turned out, because it covers the kind of the three bases that I think are so useful, and those are the three things really for me are informative, inspiring, and entertaining. And if we can do just one of those, okay, or two of them, great. But if we can do three of those things in one piece of work, whatever it might be, I think that's really very successful. And so, at least from my point of view, I was able to do it with this book, and I was really excited about being able to have this vision and then putting it into a book, which could be helpful to new parents or parents of young kids. But, even parents have told me that they end up reading it with like younger kids, and those kids are laughing and laughing, because it's really kind of it's a unique viewpoint, right? It's the baby's narrative where he's talking about, this is how you can help me. And it's told in a really lighthearted and amusing way. So kids seem to really enjoy it too.
Well, why don't we talk about another book that you wrote? So, the Maximize Your Child's Bilingual Ability. Ute, you want to maybe develop on that question a little bit?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I don't know, others have maybe read it just recently, but I read it several years ago when I bought it. And then again, later on, when my children were a little bit older, because I mean, it's one of these books that you can always take and read another chapter later on. But I was wondering, because you just mentioned also, and I mean, my children are more or less the same age as yours. So there is a little bit time passed between maybe when you wrote this book and now. And my question now is really, what would you add now to your book? Maybe there could be maybe a chapter more or something about children or teenagers even. would you add something or change something to maximize your child's bilingual ability? I mean,
yeah, that's such a good question. I think there's a couple different things, and recently I've been I've been thinking more from this perspective now where I have older kids, right? And so it's only natural, but over time, our perspective and our thoughts and feelings about certain aspects of this experience will naturally evolve and mature, I suppose. And a few weeks ago, I wrote a blog post. I don't write as much at the blog as I used to. I still do, but I really spent quite a bit of time on this one because it was something I wanted to express that I guess I wish if I was going back and I had, could go back and do it all over again, and I had the same perspective I had now, and that it was about it. The title is something like "Forget Fluency."
Yes.
This is, I forget the rest of it, but anyway, it starts with "Forget Fluency." But the idea is that over the past couple of years, I've been doing consultations with a lot of parents, almost 100 parents. And this idea of fluency comes up again and again, especially parents who are new parents or they have very small children. But what I've realized over time is that there's a lot more nuance involved in that word because it doesn't really have a lot of meaning on its own, And the way I view this, and this is what I would include in the book, and I probably had add a whole new chapter, is this idea of proficiency or fluency being a continuum, an endless continuum from zero, where there's no ability in that language yet, to this. It's an endless continuum that runs on into forever, because even as adults, we're always, even in our native languages, we can still learn new words. There's so much vocabulary in all different sorts of areas that we don't even know. So my point is that there is no end point to this process. And when parents talk about fluency, I think what they're really talking about and what they're really hoping for is to get as far along the continuum as they can during these, let's say, 18 years of childhood. And that's the best we can do. We can be as mindful and proactive as we can be, realistically can be, from day to day, from week to week, from month to month, and from year to year. And over time, if we do that, our children will move forward and will make progress along this continuum towards greater and greater degrees of proficiency or fluency. But that's what the game is all about, it seems to me. And I do think I talk about this in the book in probably various ways, but if I was revising it with this idea in mind, I think this idea, I could probably flesh it out in a fuller way, because I've gotten to the point now where I can see my daughter is 18 and I see that she's come a long, long way, but that doesn't necessarily mean her English ability, which is our minority language here in Japan, it doesn't mean her English is perfect. Of course, there's no perfection at this.
No.
And I know where let's say the holes are or the shortcomings are, but yet she's really come a long, long way, right? So anyway, I would probably try to take that blog post and I would do something similar in terms of the book. But, for the most part, at least at that particular time, this is 6 years ago when the book came out, I think it includes a lot of, it's based on perspectives and principles. And I think there's enough information in the book to really be of value to parents in terms of thinking about the experience and then actually living it out.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you, Adam. Let's take a little breather and give a shout out to everybody who's watching us right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Welcome. I think some of these folks are your followers. I believe Next Level English. We have Ricky, and
hi, Ricky.
And we also have Sylvia. Sylvia, it's good
Sylvia,
to see you.
hi.
Yeah.
Hello,
Hi,
hello.
Sylvia.
And of course to everybody else following, thank you, thank you. And if you're watching the recording of this video on any of our platforms, you are also welcome to continue to ask your questions. We will find them and answer as much as we can. So, all right, and we continue to have folks come in. Oh, Sylvia again. Hola, hola, hola. Espero que
Hola.
estés bien. And we have hello from Poland.
Marta, hello
Marta.
from
Hi,
All
Marta.
right. So now, enough of the books. Let's talk about your monkeys.
Yes, of course.
So you
They're
live in
big
Japan.
monkeys now.
They're big monkeys.
Monkey time.
Monkeys are strong. You want to be careful. Apparently, an orangutan could break your bone very easily.
Oh,
so you live in Japan, where
Yes.
it's really a very, what do I say, monolingual environment, and you raise them in 3 languages. So you have Japanese, obviously, and you got English in there, and a surprising Spanish in there. So tell us a little bit about your experience raising your kids in this environment and the challenges. Why Spanish? We want to start with that, and as a third language. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll start with Spanish because that has definitely been a third language, okay? It's something that came up maybe 7 or 8 years ago now. But just briefly, our experience with Spanish is that I really don't have Spanish ability, okay? But we met a woman who is from Spain that lives in Hiroshima with her Japanese husband. And so I asked her, would she be interested in working with my kids? And so for about 5 or 6 years until COVID, she was coming to our house twice a month. And I found every kind of basic Spanish book and app that I could find to give my kids homework almost daily, I guess, to keep them
Wow.
moving forward, even though I don't have much ability myself. There was an answer key, so that helped me. And but then, with COVID, it was hard for her to keep coming to our house. And unfortunately, our routine kind of fell apart and it turned out to be not sustainable at that point. And we haven't really gotten back to it now because my kids are in high school and they're really very busy. And my daughter's preparing for entrance exams for university. So anyway, what's happened with their Spanish then is I guess it's become dormant to some extent, but they do have quite a bit of passive
There you
ability
go.
and it used to be more active. But I do think, they have a lot of interest in Spanish and they did make some progress in Spanish. So I do hope it has a future in some way, but that's our experience with Spanish. Okay. And it was disappointing recently, with COVID, but so the main focus has been on Japanese and English. And I can say that, one of the main things for me when I'm with my situation and any parent situation really is what are the basic conditions of your situation, right? And do those conditions support your success? Do they support your aim or do they work against your aim? Okay. And that's really, that's pivotal. And that's really the baseline from which we start. And so for me, for example, even though, and this is obviously is very positive for me, is that I have a background, working with bilingual and multilingual kids, and I have some, experience and knowledge in the area, and that's all very important. However, my basic conditions, at least to start, but it's been that way for the whole time, really, are really not that conducive to my aim. And what I mean, I'll give you 3 of these conditions. Number 1 is that my wife's English level is low. And so she really doesn't use English actively. She has more passive ability, and that has been very helpful. But I realized that from the beginning, I knew that her English really wasn't going to be a source of language exposure for my kids. Okay. It was helpful, like I say, because I didn't have to use Japanese with her. She can understand my basic conversation in English. And so I didn't have to switch to Japanese to communicate with her, particularly in front of my kids. And that's a key point. And that was really very helpful.
Mhm.
But there wasn't language exposure coming from her. So that was one of the, disadvantages, I suppose, to some extent. Number
Yeah.
two was my kids have only attended Japanese schools. And even though I was a teacher at the international school, and that might have been an option, we wanted them to go to Japanese schools, in particular because Japanese is the reading and writing. It's a tough language to learn if you're not immersed in it in Japanese school day after day after day. And I saw that firsthand, and that was also useful for me as a teacher at the international school, which is the English is the language at the school, the main language. And even though the kids do study Japanese, to some extent, it's a smaller part of the curriculum. And so most of the kids, they really don't learn Japanese well enough to stay to keep pace with their peers who are attending Japanese schools, and they can struggle with Japanese, and that's not a good thing if they're living here in Japan, right? So that was very important. There's some other issues related to that, but we wanted them to go to Japanese schools. And so I really couldn't count on their schooling to support their English as well, right? And so the last one, another number three in terms of circumstances that were working against this aim were the distance from Japan to the United States is it's very far. It's very expensive for a family of four. And we only rarely were able to return while my parents were still alive. So my kids went there 2 or 3 times, but a total of maybe a month or 6 weeks of English immersion in an English-speaking environment. So that really, it had some impact, but it wasn't like a regular occurrence in their lives. And so these are 3 examples, but these are 3 big examples of how my basic conditions were kind of working against me. And because of that, this is what I tell parents, if these conditions are working against you, you have to be especially proactive about your actions, right? If there's only so much we can do to control or reshape our own basic conditions, then we're going to have to do our realistic best in terms of our own actions, our own efforts. And so that's what I've been doing throughout. And I've done what I can in terms of being as mindful and proactive about providing exposure, language exposure to them from day 1 until now day, 18 times 365. I'm not good at math, but it's many, many days. And so not only me, but I've also made a real effort to seek out other speakers of the language in various ways. So it's not just me providing this exposure, but from every conceivable angle possible that, I've been able to find or create and so a lot of that goes into my books because, again, I'm sharing a lot of my experience and my ideas that hopefully can be helpful to other parents.
I think,
definitely your experience, I would say, even within Japan. I mean, for those of us watching who don't know, Adam's from Hiroshima. Well, not from Hiroshima. Lives in Hiroshima,
Right.
which is not really the big metropolitan center in Japan like Osaka or Tokyo, where you would have much more access to foreigners. Hiroshima, I mean, it's not a small town, but it's
a big city,
it's
but
big,
you're right.
but
It's
it's
not
definitely not
Osaka or Tokyo, right?
Indeed.
Right.
So
Yeah.
all these things come into play. And what you said earlier, I think is the word of the wise, is that a language is a continuum. You go as far as you can,
Right.
and you have to gauge your expectations somewhere along the way. You cannot, as parents, sometimes we're really tough on ourselves. we
Right.
feel like a failure.
Right.
regardless of how well we see our kids progress. And
Right.
that can translate, or that can sort of get passed on to the kids. So we want to be careful about that also. So
Right.
Yeah.
we're all proud of our kids, and I think we should show them that we're proud of
Yes.
them in
Absolutely.
whatever they do. And
Yeah.
definitely, you're doing a good job,
Yeah.
regardless of that they achieve.
I
All right.
would like to just share what Banu Delisilios is sharing with us. Explanation of the basic condition for or against your aim or our aim is brilliant. Thank you, Adam.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
And then we have Ricky again, who asked the question: was maintaining minority language use more difficult during the teenage years? The reason why he's asking this, and let me share the next part that he's sharing. My boys are 7 and 5 now, and I want to pave the way for a lifelong use of English. Thank you very much for bringing this up. This is very important because, yeah, we're all in this situation where we want to do the best, and then sometimes we embark in a way or take a direction that might not, lead to where we
Yeah,
want it to lead.
it's a great question. I mean, there are many aspects to this question, and let's see if I can touch on a few of the
Mhm.
more important points. First of all, I think, I really stress the early years. It doesn't mean a child or an adult can't become bilingual to a very active extent when they're older, right? When they start at an older age. There's no reason why that can't happen. However, if you do start very early and in a sense, you can condition your kids to use that language with you when they start to use language more actively themselves, right? So in my mind, what I was trying to do when my kids were very young, when they were babies and toddlers, until 2 or 3 or 4, when they started really speaking more actively, what I was trying to do was just that. I was trying to condition them to use only English with me. How? By bathing them in the language as much as I could, by being very, very talkative, by reading books. I mean, I basically say, if you want to emphasize, if you want to simplify this, talk as much as you can, talk a lot with your child, and read a lot to your child. There's more you can do, obviously, but those are the two main things, I think, in terms of providing exposure. And so I would only, I was trying to provide a lot of exposure, and I was also trying to address this idea of need, because in my mind, there are two core conditions to to generating the kind of progress that we want, and then activating the ability that they are gaining over time. And those two core conditions are exposure. Children need ample exposure to the target language. And in most cases, they need to feel some kind of organic or genuine need or desire to use that language actively, right? Because children basically are pragmatic, and if the majority language is very strong or much stronger, let's say, than the minority language, and they don't necessarily need to use the minority language with the minority language speaking parent or parents, then they probably won't, because they can use the majority language with that parent, right? So what I was trying to do was avoid that by providing ample exposure to English. So they were developing the ability to use the language eventually. And then by the time they were using the language actively, that they not only had enough ability, but they had been conditioned or socialized to use that language with me, because I was really consciously controlling my use of Japanese around them. I never used Japanese with them, but even around them, when I was talking to grandparents or someone in public, I would use a kind of more adult voice. I wouldn't use the same type of mother-ese that we would use with a smaller child, which has a higher, brighter tone, you see. So there was kind of a distinction between the way I was speaking to my kids and then other people around them in Japanese. But anyway, I was consciously controlling this. So, by the time they were speaking, they were using English with me and Japanese with their mother. And it continued that way and has never changed because I think that process really established this is all unconscious for them, of course, but it established the idea in their small child's mind that, this language, Japanese, is with this mother figure, and this language, English, is with this other strange person
Strange.
that speaks a different language from everyone else around me, but okay, I'll use this language with him because I guess I can use it now. And so anyway, this is not conscious in their mind, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say in terms of sustainability over time is that
Oh,
see, for me, the younger years are so important because it's not only the time when we can establish this sense of conditioning or socializing them to be able to use the language actively. But, the younger years are the time when we really have the most opportunity to spend with our kids and influence them, not only in terms of language, but in every other way. Because as they get older, and Uta, I know you can empathize with this, but our kids as teenagers, they get very busy. They have friends. They don't necessarily want to spend time with their parents like they used to when they were younger. And so I say this again and again, and maybe this is something I would even emphasize more in the Maximize book, but you have a limited amount of time in terms of the golden years to spend with your children. And so I really underscore the idea of make the most of your time with your children while they're young, because as they get older, beyond 12, once they become teenagers, you'll be surprised that the time you'll be able to spend with them will probably be just a fraction of the time you were able to spend with them when they were much younger. Okay. So, really emphasize this while they're younger, and then you can hopefully make this sustainable over time. And, when I do spend time with my kids, I had a long weekend with my daughter, and we went to look at a college she's interested in. And we were together for 4 days because this college is pretty far away. And we only spoke English together. And, when we stayed in a house, which was kind of like an inn that this friendly older couple, they rent out some rooms for the night. Right. And so they didn't have any English ability. So I was using Japanese with them. Of course, there's no threat now to my daughter's English because both of my kids are older and their English is well established. Right. And so my daughter would, laugh at my Japanese mistakes, but, that's okay. But anyway, that's a long-winded answer to this question. But these are important points, I think, for kids, for parents with younger kids.
Absolutely, yes. It's very informative. Also, what I never knew how you managed then you say conditioned your children. In my ears, conditioning sounds not so positive. So it's like you plug in and they don't have a say. Whereas, and we had Mila Schwartz talking about the fact that children should be somehow involved and also have a say when it comes to choosing the language. But this is another story. And I know that at least in my family, we're a very democratic kind of family, and they always had a say. And we were discussing about also the language choice and when to use them, etc. But I would like to point out one thing that Ricky added to this, and then I have another question from Sylvia. When he said, I can very much relate. I went the whole shebang and started a program for English as a heritage language, and they love Daddy's English Club.
Great.
I think we can it's not inventing, but become active on so many different levels. And I like this idea of having an English club as a parent, or a German club, or a Romanian club. When our children see us enjoying our language and doing more about this. It can be a reading club. It can be a club where you go bowling in the language, right? Whatever you do, or hockey playing, right, Tetsu, in your language, then it is more appealing for them as well. But I would like to share with you, Adam, a question from Sylvia, who says, I'm following that pattern I do every day since my kids were born. However, my eldest keeps replying, he's 9 years old, I think, replying in English to me, majority language, not in Spanish. I keep on rephrasing what they reply to me. Any tip to avoid this situation, which is a very common situation in many multilingual families? Do you have any tips, Adam?
Well, it's always a hard question to answer to a large extent, because the advice I would offer is really based on the real specifics of every family situation. So it's different for every family. And so that's often why, sorry to preface it this way, but when I get questions, they can be hard to answer, and I can't answer them specifically. I can answer them more broadly, but I can be most helpful. And this is why I really love working with parents in these consultations or these coaching sessions, because I can work very specifically with them and support them in these specific ways. But here's one idea. I mean, one possibility is that requests, if a child wants something, that requests must be made in the minority language. So if the child wants something, they want a glass of milk, or children often want something, right? That this is one way, this is one maybe opening in terms of encouraging the child in a playful way. I'm not suggesting that this be done in a demanding way, that you're playful about it, and that if the child wants something, that you try, especially if they're getting a little bit older, that you can establish this playful rule that they try to use the minority language. And maybe if they use the majority language and they want some milk, well, maybe you're going to do it in slow motion. It's going to take them a long time to get their milk. But if they do it in the language that you prefer, let's say, that you'll do it really fast at that. You know what I'm saying? So even when I say, and let me backtrack just for a second, and I do use the word condition, but I do it in quotes because I mean it, but I don't mean it, in a harsh way. I mean it the meaning of it I do mean, but I mean it in a playful way, right? And so that's one example. It's just one example of how we can help activate the language in our children if they're not using the language, the target language, as actively as we would like. But again, I think we need to think about, the specifics of the situation. What are the conditions, and how can we, that's one tactic, but how can we do this from multiple angles? There's probably a number of different things we can do, but in many cases it involves increasing the exposure somehow, because to me that's a sign that the child really isn't getting enough exposure to the target language. And in some way, maybe we can increase that exposure, not only from the parent, but probably from other speakers of the language, for example. So again, these kinds of questions tend to be a much bigger sort of challenge that can be discussed when there is, ample time to do so. But anyway, it's a basic challenge, though, activating the minority language.
Absolutely. And I think there is also one other aspect, especially when you have more than one child, right? Because you try to give as much exposure to every child. I mean, maybe you don't count the hours or minutes that you dedicate to each one of them. That would be just not realistic. But even if you give them the same, more or less, amount and quality of exposure, every child responds in a different way.
Sure.
So sometimes it can even be that one child needs even more or another kind of exposure, and then finding this out, or finding out what triggers a child to respond in the desired language, is something that every parent can find out at some point. I know that I like this example that you made with reacting quicker if they use the right language or the target language. I did it with my children and it worked. So it's really funny. So
yeah,
It's Adam's
yeah.
creativity in full demonstration here.
yes.
Well, it's just an example. I think it's a good example of how to be strategic, but
In a fun way.
be in a playful way. You know, the approach, of course, you're serious. I'm very serious. My child is not using the target language as actively as I would like. Okay. Should I insist? Should I be very strict about it? Well, I don't know. Maybe that won't work as well as, can I do it in a more clever and playful way and still get what I'm trying to get and enjoy the experience together as parent and child? Because again, you know, it comes back to joy as well. It's not just about the success of the language development. It's also about the joy of the experience.
Yeah.
And if it's not a joyful experience, I kind of don't care how successful it is.
Indeed.
Because, you know,
Well,
it's not enjoyable enough.
The last thing you want is for them to hate the target language.
Yeah.
Then you are in lots of trouble.
Absolutely.
I would say. So,
Right.
Would you say you spoke exclusively English with them, or did you come back and forth with Japanese where understanding wasn't satisfactory?
Only English. Only
Yeah.
English. And when it's possible, again, every family's different, every parent's different. When it's possible, I really do recommend to be as consistent, as realistically possible, as close to 100% as possible when that's practical. The reason is there's kind of a big difference between 100% in the language and 99% in the language. There really is, because the more freely we use the majority language with our kids, the more we're kind of giving them permission to use that language with us, and maybe not what we want. So it really depends again on the family, and I'm not saying one way is the only way, but the more we use the language, that language with the child, the more permission we may be giving them to use that language with us.
Yeah, I would say, I guess you say condition, but I say habit. When I talk to parents about this, I always talk about the power of habit. Learned this from Warren Buffett, who said the chains of habit are too light to be felt until it is too heavy to be broken. And he's talking about bad habits, but I think in this case, it's a good habit. It also applies where you speak the target language consistently with your children, where it gets to a point where it becomes weird to speak another language. So that's something that's specifically, relating to habit, where it feels weird to not do it, right? So the more you are permissive with the other language, the more this weirdness, I guess, is reduced. So yeah, the power of habit is it's a good thing to extract the power from that.
Sure.
Yeah. And it always depends on what the goals are, right? And what the context is.
Indeed.
And I'm thinking about my family, and we have very often friends over, and we switch the languages just because otherwise we could not understand each other, which is also some of the things. And I think it's also the base or the origin of Tetsu's question. If you always spoke only English with them, and this is now my question, when friends of your children were coming over maybe to your place, would you also speak English with them, or would you switch to Japanese in order to have a conversation that goes smoothly?
Well, for the most part, I would stay in English because, for example, when I would go to my children's school, I look very different, of course. Everyone's Japanese for the most part. And English is a high status language here. Okay. They do study the language. I can't say, most people are really learning it well and can use it actively, but I would tend to stay in English even if people didn't understand me all the time. I wasn't having any kind of deep conversations, of course, but greetings and little things like that. And I think other children kind of enjoyed it as well. You know, they were touching this other culture, they were touching this language, which is a part of the culture here, but it's really more aspirational in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at least in my case, and again, I want to
Mm-hmm.
stress the point that just because I did it, like Uta, you
Mm-hmm.
were just saying, that it really depends on the family, right?
Yeah.
What works best, and that's why it's really important to find out all the details about a family's particular situation and
Mm-hmm.
their particular aims. But in my case, I felt from the start that it would be most effective for me to stay in English with my kids. And
Mm-hmm.
when I did use Japanese, that, like I said before, that I was kind of speaking in a softer tone and more quietly. So it really didn't have the same sort of impact
Yeah.
on my kids. It didn't stick, I
Yeah.
think, as strongly as the English was that I was using with them.
Yeah. And thank you. You were talking before about keeping it enjoyable and fun with our children, and I know that you wrote books with your son, right?
Yes, right.
Would you like to tell us a little bit more about this project and what made you do this with
Yeah, this
with a
is
bearded
really,
dragon?
yes, this turned out to be really a good experience because in multiple ways. As I
Mm-hmm.
said before, as kids get older, you know, spending time with them becomes more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe many of us had this, it was kind of a mixed blessing, but at at the beginning of COVID in particular, when schools closed and things like that, suddenly I had more time with my kids, right? And I know many of us had this experience. And before this happened, it was fairly not too long before this, we got a pet, okay? The first pet we had as a family. And it was this lovely little lizard called a bearded dragon. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with bearded dragons, but they're kind of a medium-sized lizard. They're very cute and they're very sweet, actually. Very gentle creatures. Okay, but the thing is, they don't do a lot. They often just sit on their rock and they bask under a heat lamp and they just kind of stare off into space like they're daydreaming, okay? And so before COVID broke out, my son and I had kind of this joke where we would look at our little bearded dragon and we would be like, what is she thinking about? You know, what is she daydreaming about? And we would make up these scenarios, kind of these wild stories about what she's imagining, which was a really funny contrast between just this sitting there doing nothing kind of thing, right? And it was these kind of ideas that, you know, you think, oh, it would be funny to make a book about this, but, you know, you never do it finally. But suddenly we had the opportunity because we had so much time together. And I thought, let's be productive, you know, and I found over the years, not only in my daily efforts, but when I'm doing, if I can make creative projects with my kids, like I would do things like making videos with them. We would go off into the woods and we'd make like a little monster movie and they were the actors and things. So we would do creative projects which were really productive for language, but also really bonding in terms of our experience as parent and child. And so I said, you know, let's make a book and let's make a coloring book, okay? And so we found an illustrator who became our illustrator for many more projects because the first one turned out so well. But we made this coloring book and it's called Bearded Dragon Daydreams, and you can tell from the cover what it's all about, right? So there's the bearded dragon and he's sitting on his rock and this is what he's daydreaming about, right? He's on a roller coaster with his friend, with his owner boy, right? And every page is like this. And it's just full of these funny ideas. And I also, I wanted it to be, of course, appealing for people who like bearded dragons, yes, but I wanted it to actually be a useful resource for families of bilingual and multilingual kids. And so I included a page of information or ideas useful ideas for parents about how this book can actually be used in a productive way with kids too, to promote your target language.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this turned out, we were really happy with this, and we were inspired, and COVID was continuing. And so we decided to make another one. And so we made Bearded Dragon Fairy Tales. And of
Wow.
course, this is a bearded dragon, Beardy and the Beast,
The
right?
Beauty and the Beast. I love that.
Beauty and the Beast. So every one of them is like this. Let me just show you quickly. But so here's Goldilocks and the Three Beardies, right? So it goes on and on like this. But again, it was really fun for us, and it was really productive in terms of our target language. And it resulted in some, a really fun book that many families around the world are enjoying. And so we went on and we created one more. This was about cats. And we did the same thing. That was kind of the idea with the Bearded Dragon and Daydreams. But we did, cats sleep a lot. So we did Cat Dreams with his little mouse friend. And so we did that. And then finally, our biggest project, and I was really excited about this because one of the kinds of books that I've really enjoyed over the years with my students and my kids that I really recommend over and over again with parents of bilingual and multilingual kids are wordless picture books, because wordless picture books can be so useful and fun for families, and they can be used in any language because there are no words.
Yes.
And I could go on and on about wordless picture books, but I collected them over the years. I had many of these wordless picture books, and I can even use them with my teenagers, because then I give them a wordless picture book and I say, okay, write out the story, right? It doesn't have to be just done orally. You can use it in writing. You can have the child tell the story to you, or take turns page by page. You tell the story in any language you want, and you control the language for the child's level. They're just beautiful, really productive resources. So I've always wanted to create a wordless picture book, and so we did. We made Bearded Dragon Home Alone, and it's the whole idea of what does the bearded dragon do when the bearded dragon is home alone. And it goes in throughout the day, from the time the person leaves in the morning until they come home. But it starts, I'll just show you a little bit. But it starts like this, sitting in the tank, just like the coloring book, right? And then the person leaves, and that's how it starts. But as soon as the person leaves, then they're getting out of their tank, right? And they're watching to see the car is leaving. And then the bearded dragon is so excited, right? It's time to play. And the bearded dragon goes to the kitchen and then starts playing with blocks and making a castle. And anyway, drawing a nice picture, right? And it goes on and on and on. And then I'm just jumping to the end finally, but and then the bearded dragon is cleaning up and flushing the toilet. He was using the toilet. And then he sees the car, and the car comes back, and then finally gets back in the tank. And then the last is right back from the beginning. And so, of course, the owner never had any idea what happened during the day. And, I've really been so happy about the book, because not only fans of bearded dragons really enjoy the book, but a lot of families, bilingual and multilingual families, are using this book in that way, where they're sharing the story in their target language, whether it's English or Japanese or Polish or Spanish. That's why I wanted to make the book, and so I'm just really happy about the book. And if you're looking for a wordless picture book, please check it out.
Yes. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Adam. You made us laugh. Now we want to know more, of course. That's very, very good strategically. But I would like also to, yes, emphasize really the use of wordless books, picture books that can be used in all languages. So many parents look for bilingual books, and then maybe the combination of the languages they have is not available or whatever.
Right.
Pick any book that you have, and don't focus too much on the words, but focus on the pictures. If the pictures are nice, like in
Right.
your books, Adam, then you can really make up the language or the words yourself. And every time you come up with another story, you focus on another detail.
Exactly. And
So
there,
it's really
there's
nice.
so many of these books out there.
Mhm.
You can find them, order them from Amazon UK or Amazon in the US. I mean, there's a lot of these wordless picture books out there these days, and you can really have a great little collection and start with a baby and just point to individual pictures and then let it grow as your kid gets older and tell the story in more sophisticated ways, and then they can join you and help you tell the story. So there's a lot you can do with these books.
Absolutely, yes.
Interesting. But, Ute, did you notice the time?
Yes, I just
I don't even
looked
know.
at
I
it.
can't believe 1 hour just whizzed by, and I was telling Adam earlier that we try to contain this within 40 minutes or so, but often we go to 50, but we don't want to go above 1 hour, and now
Sure.
here we are. but it's been most interesting and most enriching. So thank you so much, Adam, for sharing your expertise. But we do want to know, in the last few minutes, what's next? What's next in the project of the zookeeper?
You're the zookeeper now.
Well, I'll try to kind of keep this compact, but honestly, on one hand, I've been kind of at this very actively for the past 10 years, and recently, and I started doing some other kinds of work you saw with the bearded dragons and things like that. So anyway, I was thinking I haven't been quite as active online the past couple of years, and I was thinking I would move more or go back into writing more fiction. But and I did mention over the past couple of years, I've been working more directly with parents in these online consultations. And again, I found them so gratifying to be able to work so specifically on the family, what the needs are for each particular family and supporting their needs. And so I've come up with kind of a new idea, I guess, for myself, that maybe I can phrase this as maybe kind of the culmination of my work in this area, where I won't say too much about it at the moment, but I'm preparing something now that I hope can continue this idea of working directly with parents and families for their specific situation, their specific needs, and their aims, and for me to provide the kind of support that can be as effective as possible for any particular family. So that's what I'm working on now, and I'm hoping I can share this with the world in January. So we'll see how it
Wow.
goes. But I was almost kind of retired, or I was thinking I was going to retire, but now I have a second wind in a way, and so I'm kind of moving in this new direction, and we'll see what
Wow.
happens with that. And I mentioned earlier with Tetsu that I'll probably do more video in connection with this idea too. So I'll try some new things, and we'll see how they go. And retirement is always a possibility, so we'll see how it goes.
Later on, you can.
That's right.
Yes.
It
But
definitely does not sound like retirement coming up
No,
soon.
no, please no.
well, I enjoy it. I still do, and I really
Mhm.
enjoy, having these kinds of conversations with kindred spirits. So I really appreciate the chance to talk about, you know, a subject that's near and dear to all of us. And anyway, thank you. And thanks to everyone out there who's with us now, and everyone who watches this afterward too. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, speaking of, let's put up a few of these
I
comments
was clicking as
that folks have been, writing.
Vicky. Thank
Vicky
you.
says, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you. Adam, really enjoyed your books and often refer parents I work with to them. So,
Thanks so
that's
much.
great. Isn't it great? You put out work out there and you get basically fan mail, I guess. I mean, people telling you they appreciate what you do, and that's worth so much.
It's very gratifying. That's the bottom line for me. It really is.
Really,
you know.
absolutely.
It's
Agree.
very
And he also
gratifying.
says, yes, great to hear you going to keep going, which we all say.
There you go.
I'll do what I can. Let's all do what we can.
Yes,
Right?
there's Marta
Marta.
also. Gracias. Ha sido una charla muy interesante. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you.
Fantastic. So thank you everybody who's watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. It's been another enriching session. Thank you for your time, Adam, and thank you
Of
to all
course.
who have watched.
My pleasure.
And just a very quick preview. This has not happened before, but with Adam and our next guest, it just so happens that we're going to have 2 consecutive sessions from Japan. Next month, we will have a professor from the Yokohama National University, Professor Ojima, who will be talking to us something that's kind of related to what you were talking about earlier, the early years in life.
Okay.
So he's going to be talking to us about the critical period hypothesis and all the implications and relevance of that within the realm of raising multilingual kids. So definitely look forward to that. And it's not what you expect. There's lots of information coming out from his work that I've learned recently, and it's super interesting. So look forward to that. The 3rd Tuesday of every month, we are live here on Raising Multilinguals Live. Once again, thank you very much, Adam. Thank you to everybody else watching. We will see you next month.
Okay.
Thank you, Adam.
Bye
Everyone.
Bye.
Tutto
Bye for
bene.
now.
Yes.
Alla prossima.